Principles of Economics, my complete guide to understanding economics, is now available in hardcover, audiobook, and ebook from Saifedean.com, Amazon, and many more booksellers worldwide. And now I am also teaching a course based on this book on my website, Saifedean.com. Principles of Economics will run the whole academic year, from September to June, and will have a new lecture every 2 weeks, as well as weekly live online discussion seminars open to learners from all over the world and from all walks of life. Whether you're a student, a professional, or a retiree, you are making economic decisions every day, and this course will arm you with the wisdom of centuries of economists to improve your economic decision-making. You'll also get a free book of Principles of Economics if you sign up for the course. Go to Saifedean.com and sign up now. The Bitcoin Standard podcast is brought to you by Orange Pill app, the Bitcoin-only social network that connects you with high-signal Bitcoiners, events, and now merchants as well. If you're like me and can't stop talking about Bitcoin, you know how challenging it can be to talk to the no-coiners and how nice it is to talk to someone who gets you. With the Orange Pill app, you can find the Bitcoiners near you and they can replace the no-coiners in your life. You can organize events and meetups with local Bitcoiners, and wherever you travel, you can meet up with local Bitcoiners, all while being as anonymous as you like. So if you want to build your local network of Bitcoiners, find a Bitcoin meetup or merchants accepting Bitcoin, head over to orangepillapp.com to sign up, or download the app from the App Store or Google Play Store and send me a DM so we can get connected. The Bitcoin Standard podcast is brought to you by CoinKite. CoinKite are my favorite makers of Bitcoin hardware. They produce the legendary Open Dime, the first Bitcoin bearer asset, as well as the reliable Cold Card hardware wallet, the excellent stainless steel seed plates for storing your seed phrases, and the block clock. Now, CoinKite have produced the Sats card, a card the size of a credit card which can store Bitcoin and works great as a gift. CoinKite have just produced a limited edition gorgeous Bitcoin Standard Sats card, which carries the Bitcoin Standard logo, and you can get it from coinkite.shop/Bitcoin Standard. Use the code Bitcoin Standard to get 5% off your purchase. This podcast is also brought to you by the Bitcoin Way, your professional Bitcoin IT team offering you personalized, secure, and comprehensive solutions for every step along your Bitcoin journey. The Bitcoin Way offer live concierge service to guide you with your Bitcoin cold storage, running your node, privacy best practices, inheritance planning, corporate strategy, and multi-sig solutions. They don't touch your coins, they guide you through the process of acquiring your coins and securing them. If you'd like to make your setup safer and more reliable, book a consult with them and see what they have to suggest. If you want to give someone the gift of Bitcoin, get them this professional service that will ensure they start off knowing exactly how to manage their coins and not lose them. Go to thebitcoinway.com and start Bitcoining more confidently.
Hello and welcome to the Bitcoin Standard podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Ahmad Ammous. Ahmad is a medical doctor and a Bitcoiner, and my brother. Him and I grew up under the same roof. And obviously we both have spoken a lot about medicine, about Bitcoin, about economics, about all kinds of other things. But Ahmad has recently decided to become more active online and start sharing his ideas online. And so I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring him on the show, talk to him about his ideas on medicine, nutrition, and all kinds of other heretic thoughts, which you'll be glad to know he gets his heresies in the genes. So we both have very, very objectionable ideas. If you are somebody emotionally attached to the things that they taught you at university, you might consider switching off now, because we're going to be doubting a lot of them. But I'm guessing if you're listening to this episode of the Bitcoin Standard podcast, then you've probably heard many before, and you've probably heard all kinds of other crazy and controversial ideas. And if you're stuck around this far, I hope you'll be able to handle this one. So, Ahmad, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Saif. Pleasure to be here. I think your viewers would like to hear this, but before there used to be a Bitcoin Standard book or podcast, I used to live with Saif in Beirut, and we spent hours and hours grilling meat and talking about fiat, health, and how Bitcoin fixes it. So I'm proud to say that I'm probably the first Bitcoin Standard podcast listener.
Yes, from the analog days before the podcast was digital, when it was only live. Yeah, no, it's very true. A lot of the things that made it into the Bitcoin Standard, the book and the podcast, where I initially practiced on the balcony of our apartment in Beirut for a long, long time. So now let's see if we can take this circus on the road. Let's see if we can bring it to other people. So to begin with, for those of us who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about you, your background, and what brought you to the world of medicine and the world of Bitcoin?
Yeah, so my father is a physician. It's always was my dream to become one, and I went into the
Especially
profession.
since your brother failed at achieving that, so all the family hopes were
Yeah, it was
resting
all
on
on
you.
me.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I always wanted to be a physician. I went into medicine thinking that it's this grand, pristine things we are where we're helping people get better and recover their health. But soon into medical school, when I saw all these patients that weren't getting better and were doing everything that was recommended to them by their doctors, I was just very frustrated with the system, and I started looking elsewhere. And that's what got me to realize that the medical system is not really there to help people feel better. It's there to make money off them. And I understood that there are many alternative ways to make people feel better through their lifestyle.
yeah. And then, what does Bitcoin have anything to do with that? And what got you into Bitcoin? Why do you think Bitcoin is related to that? You keep tweeting about Bitcoin and health, so tell us what's your grand theory there.
My simple theory is that uh, modern medicine is due to big government. You wouldn't have you wouldn't have a centrally controlled agency that's telling you what kind of medicine to practice, what sort of physicians, how they're supposed to treat their patients, unless there's a powerful government behind this. And this powerful government would not exist without a fiat money printer enabling this. And this, I think, is the way Bitcoin is going to free us of the system. Because the main concern with modern medicine is that anything that's alternative, anything that's outside the norm, and the norm being pharmaceutical medicine, is considered to be quackery and is considered it's illegal. You're not allowed to practice as a physician if you do anything otherwise. And this is the reason why things that actually make people feel better, just such as looking at their lifestyle, such as natural treatments, are prohibited and prosecuted. And this, I think, would not be possible under a hard money standard such as Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. Obviously, we've discussed this a lot, so you know that. But I think this is a really key and very pivotal point, which I think I've not seen anybody really make the connection here. But I don't think it's a coincidence that modern medicine in its current form really took shape around the second decade of the 20th century. It was around 1914, 1915, 16, and 17. These years, when the Federal Reserve was established, when World War One was going on, when the world's governments metastasized into the current cancer that we have, when all of that government growth happened, it happened with the creation of the central bank or with the expansion of the powers of central banks in countries that already had central banks. So, for instance, places like England had central banks for centuries before, but they went off the gold standard in World War One. So World War One was the time in which those central banks really went wild, or in the case of the US, they were established. And at around the same time, you see the emergence of modern medicine. And of course, in fiat propaganda at universities, this is presented as being something as revolutionary as the invention of fire, or discovery of fire, I should say. That there's all this incredible scientific knowledge that was finally made available for us once we managed to start printing money. And suddenly, all of this old, ancient superstition, thousands of years of medical knowledge across cultures and across civilizations, Chinese medicine, Indian medicine, ancient Western medicine, ancient Islamic medicine, all of that stuff just completely gets thrown into the trash bin, as if we don't need any of that stuff, because now we've got the scientific method, as if now we've just discovered science and now we're able to figure out how to treat people medically in a scientific and rational way, and everything that we knew before that is completely invalid. And with this, you see the transformation of medicine happen in the US and by extension the whole world, since the US effectively took over the world after that. And you see, I think this is a key point. We're all taught from a very young age to laugh at all of these other alternative forms of medicine. And it's, I think, a very, very, very effective form of propaganda. In fact, you see it everywhere, that the quack doctors and the chiropractors and the homeopaths, all of these people are ridiculous. And well, maybe they are, maybe things don't work. But then if these things don't work, why do these people need to be thrown in jail? If the customers willingly want to go there, and if they want to charge the customers, and the customers willingly and happily pay for it, whose responsibility is it to decide for those two willing, consenting adults that what they decided to do among themselves deserves is worthy of prison? But this is exactly what happened. So on the one hand, you started considering all these other forms of medicine to be illegal, and of course, the criteria there was that you don't have randomized controlled trials for those things, and of course, a lot of things cannot be tested with randomized controlled trials. We don't have randomized controlled trials that show that taking a gunshot to the head can be bad for your health. There is no evidence by this standard. You should be able to go around shooting a gun at people's heads, because we don't have randomized controlled trials that say that these things are bad. Sure, you shoot people and then they die, but we all know, as they teach us in the university, that correlation is not causation. So just because you shot somebody and they died doesn't mean you killed them. Maybe they were going to die anyway. So in order to be able to be sure that the bullet indeed killed them, you need randomized controlled trials. And in order to get randomized controlled trials, of course, you can't do that with bullets. So therefore, we'll never be able to know if bullets are effective or not. And we're just going to continue to assume that we're completely ignorant. And I think this is the case with a lot of these other alternative medical treatments, because a lot of things can't be put in a pill, and we can't randomize them, and we can't control for them. You can't control for a bullet in the head. You can't randomize it, and you can't control for it. And you can't control for all kinds of other interventions that can't be put into a pill that can be replicated with an almost identical looking placebo. So with that, you end up just getting rid of all kinds of ancient knowledge that has worked for humanity for thousands of years, because it just doesn't have randomized controlled trial. But what does have randomized controlled trials, what is perfectly suited for this kind of method of knowledge? Pharmaceutical products coming from petrochemicals. And so it would happen to be a very, very, very fortuitous coincidence for us as a human race that the guy who made all of those things happens to be Rockefeller, who happened to have a lot of petroleum products at his disposal, and then he could make a lot of medicine from it. So that's why we see this switch toward all of these pharmaceutical medicines as the only way to deal with health issues.
100%. And the entire idea of randomized controlled trials does not apply to all diseases, because someone's joint pain could be caused by completely different factors. It could be due to their diet. Someone, it could be due to how they move. It could be due to their lack of sleep. So the intervention and how you treat them should be different depending on the patient. And that's how all traditional physicians used to look at things, which is there's not one treatment for every disease. There's a different treatment for each patient. And once that model doesn't apply anymore, or doesn't apply to traditional medicine, it only applies to pharmaceutical medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. But of course, there are other angles to this aspect. So, what else happened around that time that would make this, that made this medical scam take the shape that it has taken?
The main thing was the control of medical education. So in 1910, Rockefeller hired this guy Abraham Flexner to write a report to try and standardize medical education. And in his report, he basically said that any medical school that teaches non-pharmacology based medicine is considered non-scientific and needs to be shut down. So at that point, around 50% of the medical schools in the US were shut down. And everything that was teaching what we now consider alternative medicine, such as homeopathy, osteopathy, naturopathy, all of that was shut down in order to just make the education based on pharmaceutical medicine. So all the new physicians coming in did not know anything about these old traditions or old healing methods. And that was the beginning of the pharmaceutical monopoly on medicine.
Interesting, yeah. And of course, since then, I think the best way to describe modern doctors is I heard this term a long time ago, and I think it's absolutely perfect. They're prescription bots. They are just bots. I mean, this is true since before AI came up with all these sophisticated bots. This was from the time of very primitive bots where they just follow a very simple algorithm. And if you look at it, this is what a doctor's visit looks like today. You go and you tell him symptoms, and then he goes through a decision tree. It's a bot that there's no human effort in thinking there. It's just okay. So your back hurts. All right, you're old, and so if your back hurts and you're old and it hurts more if you do exercise, well, these three things mean that that leaves us with one of two choices, this or that thing. Those are the two possible diagnoses. So you ask one more question to distinguish between this or that diagnosis, and then bam, so 3 4 questions, and you've got the diagnosis. Now, admittedly, back in the 1920s, this was a superpower. You needed to go to university, and you needed to go to school for 12 years, and then go to university for about 8 years, and then practice for a few more years, and spend so much time studying and memorizing to be able to become this bot that is able to go through this decision tree and figure out the prescription that needs to be handed out. But then, really, by the 90s, not even with ChatGPT, by the 90s, this became a very trivial problem. I remember since the 90s and the early 2000s, doctors could carry, on their handheld devices, they could carry essentially medical encyclopedias, and they could just search for for the problems, and they could search for it, and then they could find all of these things. And once you perform a quick Google search, I mean, once Google was invented, that was it. Most modern medicine doctors became obsolete because all you do is just look for the symptoms, and then you trace it forward. And the entire thing, I think the entire medical school experience could have been replaced with a few lines of code, because everything that your doctor does is just follow this standard procedure. Everything from the Flexner report, it's always been, here's what you do. And of course, the most important thing for a doctor is to follow the procedure, more important than curing the person, because if they don't follow the procedure and anything goes wrong, then they'll be sued for that. So there's no room for thinking. There's no room for any kind of dealing with you as an individual, trying to understand the complexities of your life, your mentality, your outlook on health, how you think of your food, how you think of your diet, how you think of your exercise. All of that stuff's made completely irrelevant. Only one thing matters, just the symptoms. And so you go through the symptoms and you are able to provide a prescription. And how's that different from other traditional forms of medicine that you've started coming across?
Yeah, so why pharmaceutical medicine is that way is because the first drugs were antibiotics, and antibiotics were very effective in, if you have that sort of infection, it's usually to that due to that bacteria, and we get an antibiotic that targets that bacteria. So it makes sense that each disease has one drug for it. But if you look at chronic diseases, which is what troubles people the most now, uh, you can't isolate a single molecule where you can target and that causes the disease to go away. They ideally want to do that, but what they end up targeting is just a symptom that is associated with that disease. We can get a molecule and block that molecule from doing its action, and you have less of the symptom. But you're not really treating the disease, you're not treating the root cause. And by blocking that molecule, you're causing all sorts of side effects everywhere else in the body. And that's that's how modern pharmaceutical medicine is, and that's why it fails. Traditional forms of healing, the any if you even go to a chiropractor, the first thing they ask you is, what are you eating? What's your lifestyle like? How are you moving? Because there's something wrong in what you're doing that's leading you to the disease. Okay, so I can give you some things, I can give you a herbal treatment that will help manage your symptoms, but ultimately the root cause of your disease is something in your lifestyle, and that's what we need to fix. And that's how traditional medicine always looked at things, which is what you need to change in order to fix that disorder. If you ask any of my colleagues, doctors, and this is really used to frustrate me in medical school, is they don't even believe in the model of what can we change in order to fix things. It's always, what can I prescribe? That's it. If he's already on a medication, can I add another one? If can I increase the dose? Is the medication he's on the wrong one? I need to put another one in. And that's always the perspective. And that's why we're in a healthcare crisis. That's why people are not getting better.
Yeah, I remember in your early days at medical school, I we had this conversation once, and I remember for me when I would try and explain to people why Keynesian economics is bullshit. One of the main well, maybe not one of the main points, but one of the important points I would say about why it's obviously a scam is that if you read any Keynesian economist, from Keynes all the way down to somebody like Krugman today, there's always this pride in the fact that we as Keynesians don't waste our time trying to find out what caused the recession. We leave that to the silly Austrians and the silly economists who like to think too much. We focus on solutions. And so rather than engage in what Krugman likes to call a morality tale, where we try and preach to people that you should have spent less and you should have saved more and you shouldn't be borrowing too much, instead of engaging in this pointless moralizing and hectoring, Keynesians are focused on finding solutions. And the way that they find solutions is that they uh, prescribe the Keynesian solutions to those things. And of course, that's usually printing a whole bunch of money. And so I would usually tell people, well, what would happen if you went to a doctor and you asked, and, and the doctor told you, look, it doesn't matter what caused this. What matters is how we fix it. Here's a pill. Obviously, you'd walk away. This is clearly a bad doctor. And I just was under the impression that if you went to a doctor, they're going to not be a Keynesian. They're going to ask you, what is wrong with you? What did you do wrong? What are the causes of this? Before they start prescribing a medicine to you. But then I realized, nope, that's not how doctors work these days. They are Keynesians. They're also very high time preference. They don't have time for thinking about how we got here. We just want to think about the solution. Of course, that makes no sense because you can't figure out the solution unless you understand the problem. And so, whether it's in economics and whether it's in medicine, there's no interest in understanding the problem. I think because there's a very strong financial incentive for not pointing the finger at the cause of the problem, because the cause of the problem is highly lucrative. In the case of the Keynesians, the real cause of the recession and the financial crisis was the inflation of the past. But of course, they're inflationists and they want to justify more inflation into the future. And so, therefore, they're not going to say that it was the inflationism that caused this. And I think something depressingly similar is going on in medicine, wherein uh, you, the causes of your illness are why you are a customer. So they're not going to mess with whatever is causing you to be sick. Whatever is causing you to be sick is the reason why you're in the clinic today. They don't want to mess with success. That's 90% of the battle won, is getting you through the door. Whatever it is that you're doing, it's working for getting you sick and getting you into my clinic. I'm not going to mess with it. If I start asking you what it is that you're eating, what it is that you're doing, if it turns out that you go to bed every morning at 6 a.m., that you spend all night eating Doritos and drinking Pepsi, that you don't get any sunshine, that you don't get any exercise, and that you don't eat any meat, that's a pretty clear answer to whatever it is that is wrong with you. Whether it's you're depressed, whether you're fat, whether you're diabetic, whatever it is, that is the answer. And all of that can be fixed by simply making you go to sleep early, getting enough sleep, eating properly, getting sunshine, getting some exercise. That is 90% of the battle won, just fixing those things. But there's no money to be done in that. There's no money to be done. And it's also something that doesn't scale. You really want somebody who kind of follows up with the patient and asks them and makes sure that to hold them accountable. But doctors don't do that. Doctors don't have time for that. And the time that it takes them to follow up with one patient on what they're doing with their lifestyle, they could be prescribing pharmaceutical poisons to 20, 30 patients in the same time it takes to follow up with one. And so clearly they continue to choose that path.
And the sad part about it is that doctors are overworked and the system is overwhelmed, especially here in the US. But the main problem is it's not because, there's just not enough doctors. The main problem is that you're not addressing the root cause of the disease. So you are just throwing pills at it. They're going to keep coming back with more complaints, and you keep throwing pills at them. If you're not handling the root cause of the problem, the patient will keep coming back, which is great for business, but not great for the patient.
Exactly. But I think this is the key point for why it is fiat. And this is really the point that I keep going back to in all of my analyses of all kinds of different fiat things. Ultimately, what characterizes the fiat world for me is the absence of the feedback between real world and what you do. This is this is how insanity survives. If it receives no feedback from the real world, then it increases and it multiplies. So if you behave in a completely unacceptable manner, but you don't face any pushback from society, you're going to continue to behave in that obnoxious manner. And it's going to make life worse for you because you're not going to be a happy member of society when people can't stand you. So it's better that you receive some pushback, because if you did receive pushback, you would learn to adjust. And similarly, with all of these fiat phenomena that we discuss in depth in the fiat standard, you see it's the same thing. All right, something bad is happening. Now, in a free market, people who do bad things lose. So if you had a free market medical system and people were free to set up these allopathic clinics, which is a good insulting name for modern fiat medicine, allopathic medicine, versus all of these traditional forms of medicine, well, over time, people will be able to see. So some people get a bad back and they go into the fiat doctor and they spend years and years and years on expensive medication, painkillers. They get addicted to painkillers. They have several expensive surgeries and things never get better and their health continues to deteriorate. On the other hand, some guy just goes to the chiropractic and with some non invasive uh, exercises and massages able to recover and do better. If you did have this kind of market, then we'll and you might disagree with this one particular example, but that's besides the point. The point is that if you did have a free market in which both of these businesses were able to set up shop and attract customers, the the statist mind thinks, oh no, that's horrible. All of these quacks are going to be able to open their clinics, and then all of the poor stupid people will just go to those places and then they're going to get harmed. But if you believe in markets, you understand that it's the other way around. Yes, everyone can open a clinic, but nobody is forced to go to any clinic. And so, therefore, nobody's going to go to any clinic unless they have good reason to suspect that that clinic can do a good job. And so, who's going to be able to convince people? Well, whoever's going to be able to convince people is going to be somebody who can deliver results. And so, you'll see this in that maybe people who are very desperate start taking the desperate measure of going into surgery or getting into something crazy like letting a chiropractic touch your back, because that's obviously very dangerous if you listen to modern medicine. And then we'll see results. We'll see the results speaks for themselves. Will speak for themselves, and people will be able to see it. So if we had this kind of system coexisting with all these alternatives, where people are able to compare the customer experience of your average patient going into a chiropractic clinic versus a homeopathic clinic versus an osteopathic clinic versus an orthopedic surgeon, then we'll be able to tell. But then with fiat, you can shut down all the competitors, and now everybody has to go to the same orthopedic surgeon for the same back pain, and everybody gets the same procedure, and everybody gets the same consequences of the procedure, and everybody thinks that there's no alternative to it. And it's really tragic because the number of diseases that are just devastating the world, where people are psyoped into believing they have no alternative but to continue to do the horrible things that their fiat doctor tells them, is insane. And of course, diabetes is the most important one. It's the world's biggest disease. It's really our generation's defining accomplishment. We raised our blood glucose level to levels stratospherically unimaginable throughout human history. And all of that is a cause of eating sugar. And if you stopped eating sugar, then you're going to be fine. Nobody mentions that. And you have people managing the diabetes with injections and with all kinds of expensive medical procedures and with all kinds of expensive drugs. but their doctor never tells them to try it. And you can get away with that because it's fiat, because there's no free market competition between all these ideas.
Yeah, a lot of people. I mean, I've talked to people about this before, and they tend to. It scares them a little bit being having medicine not be government controlled, and oh, you need the government to make sure that the quacks is not poisoning people. And I mean, there is truth to that, but I mean, it's not to the quack's advantage to poison people. If he starts poisoning people and making them not feel well, he's going to go out of business. And any quack who has an experimental treatment, he's not going to just go and put it on the market and people are going to come and flood to him. He's going to start by trying out on his friends, on his family, and then word of mouth is going to come out. And this is especially relevant now because we have the internet, which is a great source of information about anyone and any source of treatment. And it should be an exciting time for all sorts of treatments to come up, but they don't because they are government controlled.
Yeah, I think this is really the most stark thing. And it's something that you and I had understood long before COVID, but I think COVID made it very, very clear for everybody, which is that what makes a medicine successful in this fiat system is not whether it can cure a disease. In fact, curing a disease is a massive problem for a medicine. You can't make money by creating a medicine that cures a disease. You can make money by selling a medicine that develops an addiction in the person who takes it. That's how you make the big bucks. And that's not just greed. It's not just, oh well, all these evil pharmaceutical companies don't want you to get healthy. It's it's sadly even more depressing than that, in that they don't really have an option. It costs something like 10 years and around $1 billion. And these are statistics from about 10, 15 years. The last time I checked these statistics was in a book called Against Intellectual Monopoly by Boldrin and Levine. And in that book, they say it costs, they argue against the FDA and against this current model for medical drug approval. And they say it costs around $1 billion in 10 years to get a medicine from the point where you start the process of approval to the point where you can get it on the shelves for people to buy it. That's about 10 years and $1 billion. So if you do manage to find a magic pill for cancer, if there really was a lab somewhere that managed to figure out a magic pill where you just take this one pill and cancer is cured, or any other disease, hypothetically speaking, imagine if we did actually discover something like this, it would not be viable. You cannot put it through 10 years of testing and bribes and going through all of the process for the FDA and getting all the licensing and approval, and then put it out on the market and sell one pop for each cancer patient. No matter how much you charge, you're probably not going to be able to make that, compared to a model where you alleviate the symptoms of the cancer and allow the patient to consume this drug for many, many, many years. The perfect pharmaceutical drug prevents you from dying, but keeps you dependent on the drug. It keeps you sick enough that you need the drug. That's how you're able to make the big bucks. Any other kind of model doesn't quite cut it. So we go from a system in which people are free to try whatever medicine that they want at their own choice, with their own responsibility, bearing the consequences of it, to a system where you get a paternalist authority that basically decides who gets to take which drug and when and how and why. And I mean, I think really this is an incredible example of a bait and switch. It's a real scam, because on the one hand, they scare you of this idea that, well, what happens if any crazy person can sell any drug that they want? Now that would be terrible, right? And for me, no, it's not terrible, because if I'm happy to have anybody sell whatever they want, and I don't have to take anything that they take. So someone having the freedom to make a stupid mistake and somebody else having the freedom to profit from that other person making a stupid mistake is not my problem. I will continue to make my own decisions, and I'll decide if I want to take this medicine or not. The real problem for me is when somebody has a monopoly position that can tell me whether I can or cannot take things. So we end up giving up the freedom of having the choice we have, that we get to decide which medicine to take, because we are sacrificing it in order to have instead someone in a position of authority take away that freedom from us, but tell us, supposedly because of their magical big brains, that they have only figured out that they have figured out which drug is the real one. And this is such a scam because A, nobody has complete perfect knowledge of everything. And so maybe that person is wrong. But far more important than the fact that they could be wrong is that now we have a true monopoly. And now they can put me in jail if I disagree. Now they can throw people in jail if they provide services that they don't approve of. And now they can be co opted by special interests in order to benefit themselves at the expense of the people that they're supposed to be protecting, which is what you see happen over and over and over again. So for me, I don't care about how many quack doctors are there. That doesn't scare me. What scares me is the one Anthony Fauci, the one FDA official, the one the science, the one person who speaks in the name of the science, who assumes the authority to coerce others and throw them in jail and tell them what they can and cannot do with their bodies. And I don't care about how many titles he has next to his name. I don't care about how many PhDs he's got. I don't care about how many scholarships he's won, how many grants. This is in medicine. Doctors brag about how much grants they got from the government, which for me is the exact opposite of something to brag about. But all of that doesn't really matter. What matters is that you have the freedom to decide whether you want this or not. And all of that gets thrown out the window because people are scared from the idea that, oh no, maybe somebody somewhere is going to go to some doctor who doesn't have the proper qualifications. So let's instead have one authority get to decree what is the correct uh, background and training and prescriptions in medicine methodology that people need to use. And so you end up with a monopolist. And then you end up with the system where there is no mechanism for correcting it. Because there is a monopoly, because there's a fiat money printer backing up that monopoly, there is no limit on the kind of criminality and depravity you can pull off. And you see this everywhere. You see this in everything in which fiat is intervening. And I think medicine is a great example. Relatedly, of course, also food is a great example. People continue to eat garbage that makes them sick, but there's no alternative to nutrition studies except the nutrition studies that come from the producers of the garbage, because that's how you make your money in fiat world.
100%. And I mean, when you have a monopoly running the show, running what what good medicine is and what bad medicine is, this monopoly is much easier to capture than if it was a free market, individual practitioners doing their thing. And the way the current medical system is captured is not through direct relationships with individual doctors. So an individual doctor is not getting, most of them are not getting direct financial help from pharmaceutical companies by prescribing a drug, especially the more common drugs. What How the system is captured is that the the licensing boards, the societies that set the guidelines for medical practice, these all of them, like the American College of Cardiology, the American Endocrine Society, on their websites they tell you that we are sponsored by X and Y pharmaceutical company. And these agencies dictate the guidelines that doctors should follow. And the worst part about this is that if doctors don't follow these guidelines, they are legally liable in court in case anything happens to the patient. So I've talked about the cholesterol myth on my Twitter, how you shouldn't be concerned about your cholesterol levels and that cholesterol medications do more harm than good. But say a patient comes to you and you don't give them a cholesterol medication if they have elevated cholesterol, and they go and have a heart attack a few years later, they are you are legally liable because you didn't put them on a cholesterol medication. But the other way around, if you did put them on the cholesterol medication and they do get a heart attack, then you're not legally liable because you did what the guidelines say. And that's how doctors are stuck, and they have to do what they're as they're told.
Yeah. And of course, one other very interesting factoid about the way that this develops is that there's no incentive to prescribe things that actually work as long as they are not patentable. It only can be prescribed if you can patent it. If you cannot patent it, it doesn't matter how effective it is. There is no money to be made for it. And so, again, you could be excused for thinking this is some grand, evil, nefarious conspiracy. And yet, you can see why it develops just out of the incentives that emerge right now. Again, if we go back to the situation where you need to spend $1 billion in 10 years, and it's probably at this point is at least tripled, I would say, in the last 10, 15 years, everything has gone up and things like this go up a lot. So if you need to pay billions of dollars in order to get a medicine, but imagine that you find again this new medicine is something that can't be patented because it exists in nature and you cannot patent things that exist in nature. So some kind of extract from some kind of plant or some kind of juice from some kind of exotic fish somewhere. And you take that and you give it to somebody and then they're immediately cured. Well, you can't patent that. So if you can't patent that, then the day after you get it approved and the day after it is proven that this thing can cure cancer or depression or diabetes or whatever, that next day anybody can catch that fish or harvest that plant and process it and make that chemical from it and sell it. And so therefore you will have paid the $1 billion and the 10 years and spent all of that time and effort and money in order to get the drug approved, but then you can't monetize it. So anyone can monetize it in that kind of situation because the entire business model depends on patents. And so as a result, you see why doctors are constantly prescribing pharmaceutical chemicals that are not existing in nature. And you then see why natural health people are so obsessed with natural compounds. And I know that a lot of scientifically minded people, a lot of doctors who mock the natural health people for believing that this ridiculous idea that, just because it's natural means it's good. It's not that silly. I think you're really exposing your misunderstanding of how the world really works. It's not that everything that's natural is good. Of course, a lot of natural things can kill you. Snake venom will poison you. All kinds of poisonous things out there in nature. Just because it's natural doesn't mean it's good. But if it's a medicine that is natural, and if there is good evidence to suggest that it might work in certain cases, and it is naturally occurring, you have to understand that the bias of the medical system is such that no doctor will ever be able to prescribe it. If a doctor tells you to take it, they are making themselves liable for all kinds of legal problems later down the line because you've just gotten a golden ticket. Anytime you're broke, just go back to the doctor who told you to take something natural instead of telling you to take the real medicine, and now you can go and sue him. So the doctors don't want to get into it. The pharmaceutical companies have no interest in promoting these things. And then the chorus of morons, essentially, who are the medical establishment, the professors, the universities, particularly, I think that the world's biggest morons in this field are the people who think of themselves as the science popularizers, whose job is to just go around and harangue people to go and buy more pharmaceutical drugs. Pharmaceutical problems, I think, is also apt here. All of these people going around, and there's an entire culture of people on the internet whose entire job is to just go and find people who say bad things about pharmaceutical companies and mock them for not being scientific enough. And that ends up portraying this idea that somehow you have to take things that are pharmaceutically produced that are not patentable in order for you to be healthy, and that if you must take if you're thinking about taking something natural, then you're just being a quack, you're being anti-scientific, you're being unscientific, you're being ridiculous. And this is something that you and I had been aware of, as I said earlier, since before COVID, but I think COVID made it clear to a lot more people. This used to be the sort of thing that I would be afraid of talking about in public because people would laugh and say, oh, look, this guy's crazy. After COVID, I mean, obviously, the morons still laugh, but a lot less people are laughing about it because they saw that. If you were paying attention in COVID, if you weren't a completely hysterical idiot who was just completely hypnotized by your TV, if you paid attention to what was actually going on, you saw how doctors from all over the world were saying the two particular drugs, HCQ, hydroxychloroquine, and ivermectin, were demonstrating incredibly positive results all over the world. And you saw just how much the medical mafia went out of its way to fight those two drugs and to tell the world that those two drugs are not good for you. And so we saw, first of all, the World Health Organization published a completely made up study with fake data to suggest that the drug is harmful, even though this is a drug that has been around for 8 decades and it's very well studied. And there are very, 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 very few negative side effects. So I think one of the side effects is that after prolonged use for years, you might develop eyesight problems, which is clearly not something that you should be concerned about if you need to take it for a couple of weeks when you're suffering from a serious illness like COVID that is threatening your life in the case of many people. So clearly, there was no reason to fight it. I mean, it may have been ineffective. You may conceivably argue that it is ineffective. You cannot conceivably argue that it was harmful. And so the notion that you needed to have CNN, World Health Organization, all those people lynching anybody who talks about this was obviously completely nonsensical. So then what was the incentive? Why did they really need to prevent this from getting into people's hands? Especially at a time when they were locking people up and destroying the livelihoods of billions of people and ruining the lives of billions of people by locking them up. I mean, you were willing to try destroying the economy. You're willing to destroy people's livelihoods, destroy people's education, destroy people's childhoods. All of these are risks worth taking, whereas hydroxychloroquine, which is a drug that people take in large quantities preventatively in places that have malaria and for very long periods with very little side effect, is something that can at worst be harmless. And yet it was impossible for the medical mafia to tell people to take it. I think it's really very, very telling. And the reason for that is, again, you cannot patent hydroxychloroquine. It's an old drug. It's already out of patent. And so anyone can produce it. And so if in day one, the World Health Organization had gone and said, oh, wow, we have results from several places around the world indicating that this thing works, we recommend trying it. We don't know if it works. I mean, they could have been reasonable about it. We can't be sure that it works, but we know that it doesn't hurt. So you might as well try it. Well, then all of the world's pharmaceutical companies would have started making hydroxychloroquine the exact same day. It's not rocket science. It's a very easy thing to prepare. It's a synthetic compound that can be easily prepared. And it would have been prepared in no time. And everybody in the world would have had it. And I think most likely it would have done an incredible job. There's a ton of evidence showing that these drugs work really well. I took it myself, and I noticed an immediate improvement after I took it when I had COVID. So I'm heavily inclined to believe that those two drugs would have performed a lot better than all of the very, very profitable, heavily patented poison that these pharmaceutical companies were giving the world. But of course, they couldn't do that because there's money to be made from patented pharmaceuticals.
The syllabus for my new online economics course, Principles of Economics, is now available on Saifedean.com. The course will take place over 18 lectures, each based on one chapter from my new book, Principles of Economics, which will be available for free as an ebook for everyone registering for the course. Lectures will be released once every 2 weeks on Mondays, starting on the 25th of September 2023, and will be available in video and audio format. Live discussion seminars will be held once a week on Thursdays at alternating time slots, 12 hours apart, to ensure learners can attend from all over the world. I'm happy to announce that I have set up my new publishing house and online bookstore, The Safe House, which will be publishing and delivering the best Bitcoin and Austrian economics books worldwide in hardcover, audiobook, and ebook formats. Go to thesafehouse.com to buy my latest book, Principles of Economics, as well as the Fiat Standard and the Bitcoin Standard. And now I'm also publishing Fiat Food, Matthew Lysiak's amazing investigation into how inflation ruined our diet and health. And I'm also publishing Lynn Alden's Broken Money, her masterful exploration of the failures of the global financial system and how Bitcoin fixes it. This is a Bitcoiner's bookshop, so the books are printed in beautiful cloth hardcover made to last, with an ice-colored dust jacket on top. Go to thesafehouse.com and get yours now.
The thing that I'm starting to understand more and more too is, when they tell you, you should look at the studies, look at what the studies for these drugs have shown. You actually go and look at the studies. There's a lot more studies for alternative treatment modalities, how they've worked, just like there were more studies for ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, but they pinpoint a couple of studies, and these studies get all the media attention and they get all the funding, And that's all the studies we want to talk about. So yes, it is science, but it's their science that they want you to follow, which is very unscientific.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not really science. It's the exact opposite of science. I mean, the really pernicious switch and bait here that they did was that the term science, first of all, is not it shouldn't be a noun to describe a set of proclamations. Science is not a set of statements. Science does not say that if you have this disease, you take that medicine. That's not what science is. These are statements, conclusions, ideas that you could come up with. But science is a method of asking questions. That's what it refers to. It's not a set of fixed answers, it's a method of asking questions. And that method is you propose a hypothesis and you see if the hypothesis corresponds to empirical reality. And then if it does, then your hypothesis survive, and then you look for other ways to falsify it. And if it doesn't, then you discard it. You don't see that happening. You clearly don't see that process. You just see people in position of authority abusing their authority to tell the world you need to put a diaper on your face and that's going to fix the illness that you have. You need to stay home and destroy your business and that's going to fix the business that you have, even though we have absolutely no proper scientific questions discussing this and arriving at any kind of satisfactory answer for it. But we've replaced the concept of scientific questions with scientific statements. And people have completely swallowed this hook, line, and sinker. They've fallen for the idea that science is a bunch of doctors who get on TV and tell you what to do, which is the exact opposite. And it's such an incredible scam because the whole point of science, the whole marketing around this entire science edifice for centuries has been that, oh, we are not going to be like traditional primitive backwards human societies where we just trust people because they are in position of authority, because some guy claims to be talking to God, or because some guy claims to be born from the family that is rightfully ruling over us, and so therefore we have to trust and believe the king, we have to trust and believe the priests. No, science is belief in the authority of nobody. Science is about questioning. And it's what's amazing is that all of this science popularizing industry, people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Richard Feynman, Carl Sagan, I mean, they spent decades drilling into people this marketing of this idea of science as this amazing thing, science as this incredible process. And yet you listen to them when it comes to actual scientific questions, and they're all regurgitating the same unscientific mantras with absolutely no scientific thought going into establishing them or trying to falsify them. So, climate change is a great example. Look at this food. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson is, the poster child for modern science. He believes that humans are changing the weather. He hasn't figured out how to stop killing himself with obesity, which is, a very important scientific question. I mean, if you can't experiment on yourself to figure out how to stop killing yourself by being fat, you're not a scientist. There's nothing more important in your life than your own health. If you care enough about life to get out of your bed and not kill yourself in the morning, you care enough about surviving. Therefore, you should care enough about not killing yourself with food. And if you haven't thought about how to stop making yourself fat and you haven't experimented with what makes you less fat, you're not being a scientist about it. You are just regurgitating the things that you're being told based on authority. And you see this everywhere today. You see this everywhere. It's just we've replaced religious authority. We've replaced the word of kings with the word of the priests, the modern priests, which is in a white coat. That's it. We've replaced old priests in weird robes with new priests in weird robes. That's it. But we're still following the word of authority and we're still not thinking scientifically. And if you do think scientifically, the first thing you get is you get shamed. You get shamed by the unscientific cattle that want you to just believe in authority because that's what science is for them.
Yeah, and from working with doctors for so long, I can tell you that doctors are the worst people for that. I mean, it's very, very rare for physicians to actually go in and read literature and to decide how they would manage their patients. We just follow guidelines. These guidelines are set by societies, set by websites, and these websites and societies are heavily pharmaceutical funded. So even doctors are just happy to just follow directions. And so don't put your faith in the doctor, that the doctor is doing what is scientific. The doctor is doing what he is told to do.
Exactly what he's told to do by a figure of authority. Okay, well, I wanted to start. Well, I mean, do you have anything more to add about your ideas of fiat and medicine and how they coincide before we move on?
Maybe just one thing. I'm reading Jimmy Song's Fiat Ruins Everything book, which is a
Hmm.
great read. And he talks a lot about how big corporations are replacing small corporations just because big corporations have easier access to fiat loans. And this is exactly what's going on with medicine too. Is all the small clinics, all the smaller doctors working together are being replaced by big corporations taking over. And this is because these big corporations, it's easier for them to get loans from the government. It's easier for them to get even private loans. And the entire model is shifting away from, we're not trying to fix people, we're not trying to make people feel better. We are just trying to present a script somehow to get better funding and better loans. And this is part of how fiat is ruining medicine as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is very true. We see this over and over again. I mean, you see it. Of course, another major aspect of this is the insurance industry, and we've had Andy Schoonover from Crowd Health. We've discussed their model, which I think is an excellent model that uh, is in contrast to the insurance industry. We've had Andy over twice, so make sure to link the notes in link to his episodes in the show notes, or just search for the Bitcoin Standard podcast and Andy Schoonover or Crowd Health, and you'll be able to get the episode. I highly recommend listening to that. All right, so I think we've spoken enough about the problems of fiat medicine conceptually. Now I want to get into actual content of medicine. So, tell us some of the most important things that you've learned, or should we say, some of the biggest lies that your doctors have told you. What are the most important things that somebody needs to know? Because really, out there, I think um, there is so much bad information out there that there are so many low hanging fruits out there for people that can improve their health drastically, very quickly, simply by changing a few very small things. One of these, of course, is just small changes to your diet, which most people don't even think about, but they can have enormous results. So, what are some of the most important ideas you've come across as how to make your health better in spite of your doctor?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of looking into your diet. Your diet is the biggest input from your environment. It's what's you're going, how you're building your future self. And it's important to see and be careful to what you're eating. If you look at, I'm a big fan of Weston Price's work, and if you look at all his examination of societies that have been not touched by industrialization, you see that most societies all societies based their diet on a meat and fat staple with a varying amount of plants on the side. That meat and fat staple needs to be in every meal you have. It's not a meal unless it has meat and fat or animal products. Once you get to that point, you're just going to notice such a significant improvement in your lifestyle. The the percentage of plants you want to have on the side is varying depending on what you tolerate where you live, but you need to base your diet on meat products, on animal products.
Yeah. So here, getting into contentious family issues here and sharing too much family drama, listeners will be shocked to know that Ahmed is not a carnivore, and yet we still talk, even though he eats plants. I still haven't disowned him, but he did try carnivore for. I think he was carnivore for about 2 years or so.
2 years, yes.
Sorry.
2 years, yes.
2 years, yeah. He was carnivore for 2 years and then he stopped. We started carnivore actually on the same day. I remember we were living together and I came across the website Zero Carb Zen, and I was shocked to find that. I mean, it was already very low carb at that point. We were already eating mostly meat, but then we saw that, oh wait, we don't even have to eat these little vegetables that take so much time to prepare and don't really taste well. We could just replace them with more meat. So we decided to try it for a month. That was October 2015, and we did it for the first month, and then we continued for about 2 years. Ahmed quit, I think, 2 years later. I've continued to this day. It's now been 8 years and a half, 8 years and 7 months. But Ahmed quit. So tell us more, Ahmed. Why did you quit carnivore?
It wasn't sitting well with me in that I was unable to digest enough quantities of fat. And if you're if you're on a carnivore diet, you want to be eating enough fat because that's your main fuel source. Proteins are great for rebuilding, but you want to have your fuel be fat. And so I introduce small amounts of vegetables, and that helps me digest more fat. And I mean, I just have some carrots and some pickles with dinner. That's about it. He shakes his head, but I mean, I'm 95% carnivore, and I used to, believe in, oh, it's nice to have a side of Brussels sprouts and broccoli with your steak. But now, with all the effort that goes into preparing it and digesting it, I'm kind of just past that. If I go out with friends and they want to eat in a restaurant and there is some sort of vegetable side, I will have it, and it doesn't really bother me because my gut is clean all week. Just once a week, if I eat something, it's fine. And I don't know. I mean, it's. I think getting lost in the percentage of vegetables that you're eating defeats the point. I think the point is your nutrition is meat based. If you're having a steak with some broccoli, the broccoli is not giving you any nutritional value. It might help, it might help you with digestion. It might help you get more fat into your system, but it's not really, you're not eating it for the nutrients.
Yeah, I think with the way that I see it is meat is food, plants are drugs. So if you're having some plants with your food, don't kid yourself that this is part of the meal. This is it's like having a smoke, having a drink. You're not really getting a lot of benefit from it. You're just getting it in a recreational way. Although I will say, if I were to make the and I've been carnivore for 8.5 years, so I've looked at all kinds of discussions on carnivores, and I've seen all kinds of objections, and I still am not convinced on the idea that there is a better, more optimal way. So all of the arguments that I've found against carnivore is just people who just feel very strongly that they would be a lot happier if they ate a little bit of carbohydrates, and then they think that uh, it's worth it, which for me is fine. But don't kid yourself. If you needed what's really optimal, I still think zero carbs is by far the most optimal, by far the optimal, because it is because I've tried not eating any plant food and I've seen how much it helps. I've been very curious about the ideas of Dr. Ted Naiman, who's on Twitter, and he focuses, rather than reducing carbohydrates or reducing plants, he focuses on what he calls the P to E ratio, wherein you just want to maximize your proteins and you want to minimize your energy. And by energy, he refers to carbohydrates and fat. So if you want to minimize carbohydrates and fats and increase protein, you increase your satiety. And that is his idea. So perhaps there is something to that. That for him, what matters is that you increase satiety so that you don't binge on energy. And for him, he views fat as being equally bad to carbohydrates because it leads to weight gain. And so it's all about eating as much lean protein as you can, and then controlling energy through carbs and fat. But what he makes as a case for eating plants is that they help you feel full. So rather than eating a little bit of, so if you just eat a little bit of broccoli, I guess his argument would be, and I may be doing him disservice, but I think if you just eat a little bit of broccoli, then that would mean that you will end up eating a lot less animal fat with your meat in order to be full, and therefore you get a lot less calories, and then you probably be putting on less weight. I'm not convinced entirely because I don't agree with him on the equation of the fat to carbohydrates. I don't think those two things are the same because I've gone 8.5 years without eating carbohydrates and I'm thriving. If I'd gone 8.5 years without eating fat, I'd have died by now. Fat is essential, carbohydrates are not. So there's clearly a huge difference between the two. But I think he may have a point in that you want to reduce the amount of energy that you get. And so, probably, I think a good compromise would be low fat carnivore, although that is very difficult to do. So, he would suggest a little bit of plans, perhaps, to help reach satiety. So, you reduce your fat intake and increase your protein intake. And then you would, in his mind, that would allow you to achieve your maximum leanness. And for him, health is leanness. So the more lean you are, the healthier you are. And the best way to achieve that is through maximizing protein at the cost of energy. I've not discussed this with you, I think, before. What do you think of it?
I kind of see the point of eating a small amount of plants to help with your digestion and satiety. I mean, that's how I felt when I was carnivore, is that no matter how much I ate, I still felt that my gut is empty. And how I feel now by consuming some plants, even if it's once every 2 or 3 days, is that it helps keep my colon full. And when you get that, even that small amount, it kind of keeps the gut moving better and helps you with satiety, so that actually you're actually saving on, you don't need 2 pounds of beef. You can just have a pound of beef and just some plant, because some of that beef is going as fiber into your because there is fiber in meat, it's going into fiber into your colon. So rather than leave it up to meat, give it bulk in the form of plants. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I try and reduce the amount of fat that I eat, still remaining carnivore, I feel that I do become a little bit more lean. So I do think there is some merit to this. And I know that in carnivore and low carb circles in general, people are very skeptical of the whole calorie in, calorie out paradigm. I think for good reason, because I used to be a lot heavier when I ate fewer calories when I was eating a lot of sugar. Now I eat a lot more calories because I eat a lot of fat and I'm in much better shape. So clearly, it's a lot more complicated than just calories in, calories out. The kind of calories matter. And of course, you can you can very obviously demonstrate this. You can drink calories in gasoline. Gasoline has a lot of calories. If you drink it, it's going to have a very different impact on your body than if you eat sawdust or if you eat ground beef or if you eat Doritos. All of these things have calories. 100 grams of each are going to have a very different impact on your body. So it's not just calorie in, calorie out. The substances that you ingest will have an impact for you. So I agree with that. Yet, um, even within the zero carb carnivore diet, I still notice some kind of some very noticeable difference in my body composition when I cut down on fat. I think my body becomes a lot more lean when I cut down on the fat that I eat. It's not very easy because you're not getting enough energy and you end up feeling not as good as you do on carnivore, because generally on carnivore you're just constantly firing all cylinders. You wake up in the morning ready to go. You can do whatever you want all day long. You have unlimited energy. There's, I think there's a little bit of a trade-off, unfortunately, between how good you feel and how good you look. And I think this is what bodybuilders go through. So, and all the bodybuilders tell you the same thing when they're trying to get lean for competitions. What they do is they cut down on the fat, and that's the period that they hate the most because they have low energy, they're hungry, they always want to they keep craving fat and sugar, but they stick to the chicken breasts and they keep eating chicken breasts, and that's how you get on stage and look very lean. That's how you have a very, very flat belly. I think there is some truth to that, though, but I still don't think that introducing plants is good just because uh, having gone carnivore, I just see the impact that I have when I add these things to my stomach. I see how immediately my digestion becomes different. I become bloated. I become slower. I become less sharp in my thinking. It really feels like you're putting sand in a car engine. It's just you're putting incombustible matter into an engine, and it's going to take a while for the engine to work its way through those things.
Yeah, I mean, to each his own. I'm glad you're not disowning me because I eat vegetables, so let's keep it at that.
Yeah, I'm glad we've survived that. Okay, so clearly eat meat. All right, what else?
What else? I mean, yeah. So a lot of energy could be going into trying to optimize your meat-based diet. What percentage of plants you're eating, if you're incorporating fruits or not. But I think more people need to put more effort into trying to improve their light environment and your circadian rhythm. So this is a rabbit hole that I've been going down recently. And the benefits of the sun are a lot more than just vitamin D. So the sun directly charges your mitochondria. The mitochondria are small organelles or cell structures in our cells that help generate energy. So actually, it's believed that the origin of life as we know it was when some bacteria prehistorically took up the mitochondria, which mitochondria were bacteria as well, and they divided the roles so that the bacteria sticks to making cell structures while the mitochondria sticks to making energy. And this specialization of roles is what led to modern life as we know it. It was the beginning of complex life, the ability for us to have bodies and multicellular organisms. So that's how important mitochondria are to our health. And your mitochondria in your cell, they rely on electric currents, and these currents are directly charged by being in the sunlight. So you want to be outside as much as possible. You especially want to be outside in the morning. Morning sunshine has more infrared and red light, which charges your mitochondria directly. This is before 10 a.m. So you want to make your mornings and days as bright as possible by being outside. And at the same time, you want to make your nights as dark as possible. And you do that by trying to dim the light in your house. You try and switch from LED lights to incandescent, like warm bulbs. And you try and reduce your screen exposure post sunset. And I've been trying to integrate these more and more into my lifestyle, and they've just accelerated all the benefits that I've had from diet to the next level. And I believe this is really the next lowest hanging fruit after being on a meat-based diet, is to try and fix your light environment. And I think that most people will feel a huge benefit from doing that.
Yeah, so the main ideas here is you want to get exposure to light in the morning, preferably first thing in the morning before you look on any screen or any artificial light. And you want to get light during the afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, the more light, the more you are outside, the better. The more you are able to synthesize melatonin, which is going to help with your sleep and helps with your overall body function. But the most important times are sunset and sunrise, around those times.
Uh huh. Yeah, and then at night you want to wear these orange glasses, right?
Yeah, so ideally, you want to minimize your exposure to blue light. So the artificial lighting has blue light in it. So our screens, our LED lamps, they produce blue light. Blue light is found in the natural spectrum of the sun, and your body uses it mainly to set your circadian rhythm. So when there's blue light present, that's when your body senses that this is the daytime. When there's no blue light, that's when your body senses that you're in night. So if you're getting exposed to blue light at night, you're messing up your circadian signals. It's like your body is sensing that this is daytime, even though it's 9 p.m. And that's going to make your sleep quality worse. That's going to also affect your melatonin synthesis. And melatonin is a lot more important to you than just for sleep. It's anti-inflammatory, it's anti-cancer, it has a lot of important functions with managing your hormonal levels. And so you want to optimize those. And the best way to do it is ideally you don't want to have any artificial light or screen exposure. But because we live in an environment where you might need to be productive at night, or you might have to be somewhere bright, wearing blue light blocking glasses will, what they do is that you can still see, but they block out the blue light that's going into your eye. And your eye is the main site sensitive to blue light. So if you block that, you your melatonin synthesis is a lot better.
Uh-huh.
It's one of these, like, it looks like a scam. You're just selling people glasses, but that's what I thought, and I thought I'd give it a try. I felt a lot better after using it, and your quality of sleep just feels so much better.
Yeah, that's the same here. I remember when you told me about it, I was pretty skeptical and I didn't really feel like studying this because, I mean, I think a lot of carnivores go through this and it's very liberating. Wherein once you've tried carnivore and you've eliminated plants, you witness such an enormous improvement in your health that everything that you had bothered with before becomes very inconsequential in comparison. So, why would you care about this or that tiny little uh, obsessive piece of OCD that people have about health when you know that it doesn't really move the needle compared to just eating meat? And so I've grown very skeptical of the entire idea of scientists are going to come up with something that I'm going to read in a paper and then I'm going to go and do something about it and it's going to make my health better. I'm going to probably spend money, I'm going to make them richer. But the idea that it's going to deliver actual benefits to me in the long term, sustainable, reliable results seems extremely far fetched. And I believe it's an entirely reasonable position because the amount of benefit that you get from your butcher, just if you ignore everything on the internet, everything that has ever been written about health, and ignore all of that stuff and just go and eat meat and drink water, you're going to be ahead of 99% of all health gurus with all of their optimizations. So I was pretty skeptical. And then you gave me those glasses and you told me, all right, just wear them at night. And I, you know, true to form, I didn't look it up. I didn't research it. I didn't waste my time. I said, all right, he got me the glasses. I'm just going to try them. And I tried them and I did notice a difference. And I'd say for me, I still notice the difference now. So every day that I don't wear the glasses at night, I wake up the next morning and it's harder for me to open my eyes in the sun. And the days when I wear them at night, the next day, it's easier for me to open my eyes in the sun. My eyes are more fresh. I'm able to enjoy the sun and enjoy being in the sun a lot more. So I think definitely there is some value to that. And on some of the podcasts I've worn these glasses, I assure you they are not a fashion statement. It's because I'd be recording the podcast late and there'd be the flashlights in my eyes. And it would be pretty exhausting if I would just do it under the light without these glasses. So, okay, that's a good one. Now, what about the sun? How bad is the sun, really, Ahmed? Tell
Yeah.
us.
So the sun is not bad for you. The sun is actually an essential component of health. The sun's gotten a bad rep because uh, there were some studies that showed that it increases the risk of skin cancer. But if you actually investigate these studies, the sun increases your risk of getting some of the benign skin cancers, such as squamous cell carcinoma. These rarely lead to systemic cancer, are really rarely lethal. And actually, the deadly form of skin cancer, melanoma, that's not associated with sun exposure, and it's actually worse if you're not exposed to the sun. So, but the hysteria around the sun is perpetrated by the sunscreen industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry selling people a product to try and protect them from the sun. Sunscreen is unfortunately bad for you. The ingredients in it are hormonal agents, so they act on your own hormonal receptors. They block your own hormones from working on them, so they affect your hormonal system in a bad way. And the harms we are getting by avoiding the sun are far, far worse than any harm that could be gone that we get from being in the sun. And maybe the vilification of the sun is probably just as bad as the vilification of meat and fat in how it's affected our health.
Yeah, although I think one important factor here is the diet. I think a big part of the reason why people burn in the sun is that because their body doesn't get the healthy animal fats that are essential for health. Instead, they get garbage hydrogenated oils from heavily processed plants that are poisonous in many, 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 many ways. And these cause a lot of problems for health, and they result in skin burns. I think it's pretty clear. And the internet is full of stories of people who quit seed oils and suddenly they no longer burn. I think this is a truly important point because notice the spread of seed oils came at around the same time as the rise in cancer, skin cancer in particular, and the rise in skin cancer also came around the same time as sunscreen. So, all in all, it seems to me like such an incredible coincidence, one of the many, many paradoxes of fiat, which are just basically fiat people unable to reconcile reality with their brainwashing, that humanity has lived for God knows how many years, and we only developed skin cancer as a major health problem just in time for the invention of sunscreen. What a lucky coincidence. I mean, just in time for the development of skin cancer, we finally we just at that time exactly we developed the thing that protects us from the sun. Isn't that curious? Of course, nobody ever stops to think, hang on a second, maybe we didn't just randomly develop cancer at this point in time. Maybe the cancer came from this point at this point in time precisely because of the industrial garbage food that we started to eat and the industrial garbage sunscreen that we started to put on our skin. I think that is probably a very strong, good case because all over the world you see people who get exposed to the sun in very, 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 very high doses and don't suffer from burns. Last summer, I spent the entire summer on a quest to get my children and I to have as much sun on our skin as possible. Zero sunscreen all summer long. We would spend entire days on the beach, shirtless in the sun, getting as much sun as we possibly can. At no point did we ever consider putting in any sunscreen, and at no point did anybody develop any burns or any kind of damage to their skin. Everybody's skin is fine and healthy, and on the contrary, it gets a lot better with the sun. You don't really burn if you eat well. I think, I mean, if you eat well and if you've gone through an extended period where you had very little sun contact, then you'll burn a little bit when you if you go and get a lot of sun all at once without having worked your way up in terms of your exposure. You'll burn a little bit. It might hurt a little bit, but it won't be anything drastic. But if you keep continuously getting sun and you don't eat the seed oils, there is nothing more glorious than sitting in the sun. I mean, for me, I life for me is just an attempt to try and get into the sun. Everything else that I do outside of the sun is just things that I have to do so that I can get by myself more time under the sun. The sun is just absolutely, absolutely amazing. And if you are afraid of the sun, I feel sorry for you. I really hope you reconsider your priorities in life. The sun is good for you.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, if people do have an issue with getting burned, the best way to avoid that is to again get morning sunshine before 10 a.m. Because in the morning there's less UV light in the rays coming from the sun, so you're far less likely to burn. And but this sun is enough for you to start building up your tan, building up your sun callus, so that you're gradually able to spend more and more time in the sun and closer to noon time.
Yeah, that's a good idea. All right, what else? Statins. What are statins and why are they the biggest scam in the history of medicine?
Statins are the number one most selling drug in the history of medicine, and it's all a convenient lie that came all together, which is, let's try and vilify animal fats and cholesterol as the cause of heart disease. This was in the 1950s when there was a rapid increase in the rate of heart disease and people were trying to figure out why. This guy called Ansel Keys came up with this 7 country study which I'm sure you've discussed on your podcast before. He looked at the rates of cardiovascular disease with saturated fat intake and saw that there's increased cardiovascular risk with more saturated fat intake. What people don't know is that when people analyzed his data, he had actually eliminated some countries from his studies. And even Ansel Keys himself, before he died, he said, no, saturated fat does not cause heart disease. But his study was ideal for both the food and drug industry. The food industry were telling you that meat is bad, and so meat is protein and fat. And instead of eating animal protein, you are now eating plant-based protein, which there's a lot of margins to make on. Instead of eating animal fats, you're eating hydrogenated vegetable oils, where there's also a lot of margins to make on. And at the same time, if we're telling you that cholesterol and animal fat is the cause of heart disease, we are selling you this pill, the cholesterol medication, to try and lower your cholesterol levels. The studies, if you actually look into the actual studies that have examined statins, they only show marginal benefits in reduction of cardiovascular events, but they come at an incredible array of side effects. The most basic of which are muscle weakness and fatigue, but they can be as bad as neurological conditions and autoimmune diseases, heart failure, because essentially the statins work on this pathway called the melovenate pathway. And this melovenate pathway is essential for the cells to regenerate itself. And by blocking it, you're only calling for harm to the body. And I see it all the time. Like I see older patients who come in and their family is concerned, oh, he's been very forgetful recently, he doesn't respond to us anymore. And I find out that they've been started on a statin a few weeks ago, and I stop it, and 2 days later the family is like, wow, he's a new person, he's back to where he used to be. And it's that powerful, it's that toxic, that only a couple of days off it, the person is back to his baseline. Unfortunately, most physicians don't know this, and most elderly people in the US are on these medications. So how much of the dementia that we see in older people is due to statins? I'm only I'm only I'm only scared to find out, you know.
Yeah, we hosted Kate Shanahan on this podcast once before, and that was her theory. She says the reason all old people today are basically demented, um, very, very frequently demented when you meet old people. I mean, it's just becoming really quite noticeable. And I think she's really onto something. I remember, I'm not that old, but I remember the 1980s. I was a child in the 1980s. And I remember back then it was more common to see old people being wise, being intelligent, being the, you know, have their full mental capacity plus many decades of experience with which to use that. And I think it's really quite noticeable that today, it's not just that I've gotten older. I think, objectively speaking, compare your average 70-year-old today to your average 70-year-old 50 years ago. I think the average 70-year-old today is, I can't think of a nice way of putting it, but a lot less sharp and a lot less mature and a lot more damaged in the head, I think. And I really do believe that statins are a big part of this. I think she's definitely onto something. We've discussed it with Shannon. We've also discussed it on this podcast with Malcolm Kendrick, who's written an incredible book called The Cholesterol Con, which I very, very, very strongly recommend. If you're on statins, I mean, look, I'm not a doctor, and this is not medical advice, and don't do anything because I say it. And it's your call. Do whatever you want. It's your life. I'm not telling you to do anything. But I very strongly recommend listening to what Malcolm Kendrick has said, because he's been researching this for many, many, many years, and he's got such powerful evidence to, first of all, he refutes the entire diet heart hypothesis in the way that it's been presented by Ansel Keys, which I think anybody with three functioning brain cells between their ear at this point has figured out is complete garbage. And then secondly, he presents an alternative view of heart disease based on inflammation. He argues that the cause of heart diseases is inflammation in the arteries rather than the fat that you eat, which I think also makes a lot of sense because you can see how garbage food does cause inflammation. And you can see how that would happen in your arteries as well. And then he explains why he believes statins are not just useless, but extremely, extremely destructive. And these are the drugs that have made the most money for pharmaceutical companies in history, although I probably think COVID probably overtook that. I think the COVID treatment by Pfizer and these other companies probably made more money in a couple of years than statins did in decades, although I don't have exact statistics, but it's just a guess. But the interesting thing, the strange thing about, well, that's not so strange, but now statins drugs are off patent. So now anybody can do them. So now there's very little money to be made. Yet institutional inertia is such that official fiat medicine will not admit that they were wrong about it. They would rather keep doubling down on the mistake rather than admit that it was wrong, even though there's no money, no more money to be made. So I think at this point, pharmaceutical companies don't care about statins, so they're not out there trying to destroy the careers of people who talk about statins in the same way that they would destroy the people who would talk about other more lucrative drugs. Leave that up to your imagination. But the medical field, the doctors, the universities, the textbooks that have been written, the reputations that have been staked on this are just not going to take this easy. And these people will continue to convince themselves that they're not out there killing millions of people with this drug rather than admit that they've done this and save many, many more millions of people's lives by telling them stop taking this. But that's just fiat medicine for you.
Most of my fiat doctor colleagues, they don't know that statins have issues with them. They don't look into that. It's just it's a drug you prescribe and life moves on, which is
Yeah, it's very sad. It's very, very sad. All right, what other big scams people should know about? Should people know about?
I think, I mean, the most important scam, I think, is also this idea that you need a primary care provider and you need to be established in healthcare. I think it's, I mean, you want to know that you're able to go to a doctor in case you need it, but I don't think the average human being needs to be established with a physician. The best way for you to take care of your health is you need to get to the point where you're healthy enough that when there are changes in your lifestyle that upset your homeostasis, upsets your balance, you're going to feel that. And in that way, you become your own best physician. And I think this is the ultimate way we're going to end this medical cartel, this medical system, is that everyone takes control of their own health.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is very true. Something that I feel myself. I've since going carnivore, I've become very, very aware of my body, and so I immediately can tell when something is off. I have no trouble telling what it is that caused it because usually the run of the mill day is do the same things, eat the same things, enjoy the same awesomeness of being strong and healthy and happy and energetic. And so as soon as I change anything and something bad happens, I immediately can draw the connection between what's going on and how it affects me. And so that really is, I believe, so much more valuable than any kind of doctor because I ate this thing and it caused me today to have this reaction. I should probably stop eating that thing. Problem solved. Now, if you were eating a bunch of bad things, it's very difficult to be able to ascertain the difference between all of these different things and which one is causing the harmful effect on you. And since you're probably sugar addicted and you're eating all of those things, it's very difficult to stop any one particular one of those things because you're constantly getting cravings for all sorts of things. So then you're lost, and then you need this kind of expert to guide you. But really, it's not a free market institution, so those people don't really have a strong incentive to go out there and look out for you. It's an institution that's geared to their benefit, so they go out there and look out for themselves. And they have fiat power behind them. They have a money printer backing them, and they have the ability to continue to impose whatever they feel is correct on you. All right, another scam. What else is going on?
I think we've talked a lot about.
What about niacin? A lot of Bitcoiners keep talking about niacin. What's the
Yeah.
deal with that?
Um, so niacin is an essential vitamin. It's vitamin B3. It's essential to get it through the diet. Uh, you usually get, if you're on a meat-based diet, you usually get to enough niacin for your body to work well. However, there is data out there about using it in supratherapeutic doses. So we're talking about taking 1 to 3 grams a day. And when you do that, it also works on your mitochondria in your cell. It also helps energy generation in your cell. So a lot of people in the Bitcoin community have started doing that, and I use it sometimes. It helps with energy. The most amazing effect I feel is just on your skin. It gives you this radiant skin that's just like people look at you and they're like you look like you use all the best lotions out there, but it's just from the niacin and it comes from the inside. It does come with, when you start using it, it causes a flush when you start using it, and this can be quite annoying to some people. And even when you continue using the high doses, it can still cause some heartburn sometimes. So it's something I experiment with. People with skin conditions especially really benefit from using it. So people with skin conditions should look into using it regularly. I don't know if it's a thing for everyone, but it's worth the try.
Yeah, you got me a whole bunch of it. I tried it. My personal experience was that so apparently there's a thing called flushing, and you keep upping the dose until you flush. I took, I think it was 250 micrograms, no milligrams,
Milligrams, yeah.
and it was a tiny dose, and yet I was knocked out. I remember for half the day I was not myself. I had to lie down, and I slept, and I felt. It definitely had a big impact on me. I think I did feel some of the benefits that you mentioned, but I just think it wasn't worth losing half a workday.
Yeah, I mean,
over it.
you will get used to the flush after you flush the first couple of times, and then you stop flushing. So it's worth it to give it a try. There's a lot of data out there, data that's suppressed by fiat medicine, that it's been used to treat cancer, it's been used to treat autoimmune conditions, and there's a lot of cool stuff about it out there.
Yeah, and it is niacin is vitamin B3, right?
Vitamin B3, you want to make sure that you get the pure form, the powder form, not the sustained release tabs, because some of the components they add to make the tab sustained release is not good for the liver. And the instant release is the one that causes the flushing, and that's the one that you want.
I see.
And again, you don't look at it as a dietary supplement because you're not getting enough niacin. Probably if you eat enough eggs and meat, you are getting enough niacin, but you are using it in a different pathway which directly energizes your mitochondria.
Okay, great. Now tell us about you and your plans. You're classically trained fiat medicine doctor, but you've spent, I'd say, at least the last 10 years learning on your own all kinds of other alternative different things. And I think you're at a point now where you feel confident enough in these things that you can talk about them publicly, and you can recommend them to patients, and at least open their eyes to different choices that they might not get from their regular fiat doctor. So what are you going to be doing about this? You started a medical newsletter, right?
Yeah, so I have a newsletter. You can sign up at ammosmd.com. I have my Twitter, uh, ammosmd, which I also post a lot of informational stuff. My goal is to eventually be a physician who is free on my own to see my own patients the way I want to see them. I want to look into your lifestyle. I want to see what questions you have about lifestyle, about diet, about circadian rhythm. And I've started an online consulting service that you can sign up for through my website. Uh, that's about it. I think the patient physician relationship is very important, and that's something I want to maintain and work on with my clients.
Yeah, I think I really agree with you, and this is one thing that I think is really missing, which I've missed when I've had to deal with doctors, which is you really want to have somebody that you can talk to. I remember once when I was in college, I had ankle surgery, and I remember the most frustrating thing for me was to try and grab a hold of the doctor and just spend a few minutes getting to get his opinion on what's going on, what I should do, I should take care of. And it's just, there's always this idea in their mind where they're just so busy. It's just typical fiat disease. And when you think about the fiat impact that it has on medicine, then yeah, it's clear why the doctors don't have time to fit you into their mental space because A, they've got hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical debt that they need to pay off. And so the more people they see, the more they pay off the debt, the better off they are. And so the more time they spend with you, the more in debt they're going to be. And that's why they're constantly in a rush. Then they need to meet quotas and they need to meet goals and they need to meet certain level of prescriptions. And if they don't prescribe enough drugs and procedures, they get fired. Remember the story of Sean Baker. He started telling his patients to start eating meat and stop eating garbage. And he cost the hospital a lot of business because all these patients who were coming in for knee replacement or hip replacement suddenly don't need those hip and knee replacements once they start eating properly. So that thing does not exist. And in fact, Sean Baker almost lost his job, I think, or went through some horrible things with his hospital because of this. But I think in fiat world, this is not sustainable because if you're a fiat doctor and you're holding on to fiat dollars, you just need to keep playing this game. You need to be in debt. You need to spend all of your life in debt, student debt, then housing debt, then car debt, and you just keep piling on more and more debt obligations. And you don't have savings, and so you're constantly running like a debt slave. Your time, you don't own your time. You don't have the peace of mind to be able to sit down and think. And I think what Bitcoin is going to allow, if doctors can have Bitcoin, doctors can save, doctors can appreciate, can have a form of money that they can hold on to the future. Well, then they can take their time with patients. They can build long-term relationships with patients. They don't need to be handling 50 patients every day. And they don't need to be going through all of the institutions of fiat medicine, the insurance and all of the hospitals and all those really parasitic institutions that make medicine so much more complicated. You, as a Bitcoiner, you can just have a direct relationship, peer to peer, with your patient, patient to doctor relationship, peer to peer relationship, paying in strong, hard money. There's also peer to peer. Nobody can censor and nobody can intervene. And I really believe this is the future. And I'm very excited about you doing it. And I wish you the best of luck, not
Thank
just because
you.
you're my brother, but also because it's a great thing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Cheers, man. Thanks for coming on. We should do this more often.